This is not the time to falter. This is the time for this House, not just this government or indeed this Prime Minister, but for this House to give a lead, to show that we will stand up for what we know to be right.
I regret the whole thing from start to finish.
The truth is also that you can lose your credibility in 45 minutes.
I've lost my son and I think I've got the right to know.
The inquiry will have access to all the information held by the government. No British document and no British witness will be beyond the scope of the inquiry.
It has been one of the most forensic examinations of government decision-making in British history, scrutinising the rationale for going to war with Iraq in 2003, the execution of the conflict and the legacy of an intervention which continues to haunt the UK and its major ally America. And the families of the 179 British men and women killed in Iraq hope to get some answers. Answers they demanded on the inquiry's very first day 7 years ago.
I've got to know everything, I've got to know every question that's been asked and every answer. To say I've lost my son and I think I've got the right to know, because if we don't get these answers, I don't think families will really settle down and want to know why. We've got to know why.
The families want to know, was there a secret deal to go to war? Crucial to that question is the issue of when the decision was taken. Did Tony Blair sign up to back a US president committed to regime change long before he sought the permission of Parliament?
We were the first Europeans to meet the new president. I've had very ambassadors like to do that, and I was very pleased about that.
Sir Christopher Mayer was UK ambassador to the US when George Bush was elected, and recalls a close relationship between President and Prime Minister from their first meeting in 2001.
I need them to get on. And George W. smiles his crinkly smile at Blair and says, welcome to Camp David, Tony. Can I call you Tony? And Blair, without missing a beat, says, it's great to be here, George. Can I call you George? And off they go.
As they told me, he's a pretty charming guy. He put the charm offensive on me. And it worked.
I was there at the first meeting, and I thought they got along well from the start. And I think part of that is because, while they're different personalities, they assessed each other as being serious folk who could be taken at their word and could be trusted.
The events of 5 months later would cement the relationship when Tony Blair promised to be at America's side after the 9/11 attacks, flying to Washington, D.C., where his support earned him a standing ovation in the U.S. Congress.
America has no truer friend than Great Britain.
I think he liked being the only politician in the world who could pick up the phone to the President of the United States, the whole sort of glory of it. So some of it was genuinely moved about 9/11, some of it was just getting very excited about being so close to the President of the United States.
That assessment by the former International Development Secretary, who resigned in the aftermath of the Iraq invasion, does little to quell suspicion that Blair told Bush he was on board with the USA in taking on Saddam Hussein, come what may. The long-held US policy of regime change in Iraq gathered pace in the months after the terrorist attacks.
I think they reached an agreement, and I think from the beginning, Tony Blair had wanted to support the Americans if they were going to take action against Saddam Hussein. Why? Because he thought that Saddam Hussein was a bad and very dangerous person in the Middle East, and the world would be better off without his regime.
But did that mean war? And did Blair secretly sign up to it? Much has been made of this meeting in Crawford, Texas, a full year before the conflict. The two leaders had meetings without advisers present. No minutes were taken. Was this the moment from which there was no turning back?
And I know you can't wait, and neither can I.
At the inquiry, Blair said no.
The only commitment I gave, and I gave this very openly at the meeting, was a commitment to deal with Saddam.
Had they agreed to go to war at Crawford, I mean, willy-nilly, then it means that everything that followed, including going to the UN and all that, was a kind of hollow game playing to deceive the public, and that everything that was said in public about, you know, no decisions have yet been taken, blah, 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 were all lies. It would mean that Bush and Blair had for 9 months lied to their respective publics. I simply don't believe that that happened.
But it's a possibility that haunts some of the families of the fallen. Gordon Gentle was just 19 when he was killed in a roadside explosion in Basra in 2004. Still questioning the truth is hard for his mother Rose to deal with.
You honestly don't think the Prime Minister's going to lie to you? You think, well, he's the Prime Minister, he's got all the questions and all the answers, so he's not going to send our forces in to bomb a place up that has nothing to do with us. So honestly, you thought, well, I've got to believe the Prime Minister.
Rose wants to know if the Prime Minister who sent her son into harm's way was honest about the reasons why. And the report will need to answer questions about Blair's use of intelligence surrounding Iraq's alleged weapons of mass destruction. Despite months of searching by inspectors in 2002 and 2003, none were ever found. Did Blair misuse the intelligence?
The intelligence base that Blair used was the same intelligence base that Republicans and Democrats in the United States pointed to when we talked about the threat of weapons of mass destruction. The intelligence services throughout the West had the same view on WMD. Problem is, it turns out, we were all wrong.
There has been much analysis since about the quality of the intelligence, but Tony Blair used it in September 2002 to present a hard-hitting dossier to Parliament on Saddam's capabilities.
It concludes that Iraq has chemical and biological weapons, that Saddam has continued to produce them, that he has existing and active military plans for the use of chemical and biological weapons, which could be activated within 45 minutes, including against his own Shia population, and that he is actively trying to acquire nuclear weapons capability.
That potent 45-minute claim was discredited. Were the intelligence services to blame, or did the Prime Minister misrepresent the facts to bolster his case? Either way, according to Hans Blix, who led the search for WMD in the run-up to the war and asked the UN for more time to keep looking, the claim damaged Blair's credibility.
Politicians often spin. They want to convince the public, and they go too far then. And if it isn't about, say, building a bridge and all the advantages of doing that, then may not matter so much. But when you are trying to convince the public about going to war and put people in risk, then I think they need to have more responsibility. I mean, he had this famous comment that the Iraqis could attack within 45 minutes, that I think he later regretted. But the truth is also that you can lose your credibility in 45 minutes.
I think Tony judged that it was absolutely right to stick with America all the way, and I can use my famous spin skills and charm to get Britain there, and there's nothing wrong with a few half-truths and slight misleadingness because I've decided this is the right thing to do. I think that's what the story is.
Another way to describe a half-truth is a lie.
Indeed.
More than a decade on, many share that opinion, and the Iraq report will cast its own judgment on Tony Blair's honesty, drawing in part on evidence his former cabinet secretary gathered back in 2004. Lord Butler produced his own review of the intelligence which helped build the case for war and Blair's use of it.
Now, I don't think you can describe somebody as deceiving when they say something that they believe. And the intelligence community did believe that Saddam Hussein had got weapons of mass destruction and was trying to get more. And that conclusion was faithfully reported in the dossier. What wasn't reported was that they had said that our intelligence base is thin.
The presentation of that intelligence was undoubtedly important in persuading MPs to send thousands of Britain's troops to war in Iraq. And the failure of the inspectors to find any chemical or biological arsenal bedeviled Tony Blair's attempts to get UN backing for the conflict. And even now some wonder whether the invasion which cost so many lives was actually legal.